Welcome to another episode of Metal Mastermind, and today we're gonna be talking about writing metal riffs in drop D. Of course, the cool thing about drop D, writing your own riffs and songs in drop D, is that it's going to be heavier. There's a lot more meat in drop D than playing in E standard. But the challenge can be is the fact that everything changes. All your notes and the chords that you're going to be playing, well, those are about to change, and that's what we're going to cover in this video. And let me give you a quick example. So here's just a progression, simple 3-chord progression in standard tuning: E minor, C, D. Now, let's tune our guitar to drop D, and we're going to essentially play the same thing, and, well, here it is. So now you see, or hear rather, how things changed, okay? We played that heavy drop D power chord, but when we went to the C and the D on the A and D strings, well, that didn't work out so well. So here's what you want to play instead when you're playing in drop D, trying to mimic this riff that we just played in E standard. Much better. So in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down 3 different simple progressions here, and I'm going to share the chords and share some other insight, and this is going to help you further write better riffs and write more songs in drop D, and hopefully it'll help you overcome some of those challenges that you face when you're trying to figure out which chords go with drop D. Here's riff number 1 in standard tuning. Alright, so that was in E standard tuning, and essentially that was the same thing that I gave you in the example, but I wanted to dig a little bit deeper here. So our chords, we're in the key of E minor, by the way, but I know we're playing power chords, so sometimes we don't call out minors, but we are in the key of E minor here, and the power chords that we're playing is just an E, which that would be a minor, okay? E, C, and D, okay? Those are our power chords. Now, we're going to play the riff in drop D, but we want to mimic this riff, okay? We want it to sound like this riff, same progression and everything, but a different key. It's going to be in the drop D key, and we'll go over that. So here's what the riff sounds like in drop D. So you notice that the chords changed here. We did not play the C and D, we played something else instead. So first of all, when you're playing in drop D, if you're going for that heaviest note possible, as a lot of us metal guitar players and metal musicians do, you're actually now playing in the key of D minor, okay? The other E standard key, that riff was in the key of E minor, right? E minor, C, D, or power chords, E, C, D. Now we're in drop D, playing that heaviest note, that lowest note. We're actually in the key of D minor. So our first note is a D minor and or D power chord. So next, we did not go to the C and D because that doesn't fit the same progression, right? And we pulled that off with the E standard tuning, E, C, D, but in this case, in this key of D minor here, we're going to go D minor, B flat, then C. And the easiest way to remember this is really that everything on the A string down is going to drop a whole step, okay? So think of it this way. When we were in E standard, again, we played that E, right? Well, now we're tuned to D minor instead of E. So this E standard tuning went to a C, right? Well, if you go down a whole step from C, what do you have? You have B flat, right? Next, we went to a D when we were in standard tuning. Well, what's the whole step down from a D? what's a C. So that's an easy way to remember this, but I want to move on to a little bit more complex riff. Not really complex, but a riff that's just got a little bit more substance to it. So check this out. This is the second riff, and this is in standard tuning. So we've got a little bit more going on in this riff here, and again, we're in E standard tuning here. That's the first riff, and we're going to play it in drop D, of course. But here are the notes that we're playing, or the power chords rather. There's some power chords and some single notes down here. So first we start out with that E power chord. Now here's something I want you to notice, and this is going to be really cool when we get over to the drop D version coming up next. Okay, we didn't play the E power chord with the heaviest notes possible. We actually played it an octave higher on the A and D strings, and I did that on purpose, and again you'll see why once we get to the drop D part. But we play that E chord, that E power chord. We've got a little thing going on there with it that makes it sound cooler. I'm not going to get into that part, but so we start with the E, then we go to a G, an A, and then we've got this cool little single note riff here. Okay, go from B, C, and then back to B. Now let's hear what this sounds like in drop D. So that was pretty cool, and we're gonna spell out the notes here in drop D as well. But what I wanted you to recognize first and foremost is the chord that we started with, which of course is the D minor, the D power chord. We didn't play the heaviest one possible there, okay? We switched things up a little bit here, but we did play that D power chord in the same position that we would play a D power chord in standard tuning, because we're playing that on the A and the D strings. I wanted to kind of throw us for a little bit of a loop there and not start with the heaviest notes possible. Let's move that up an octave and do something a little bit different here. Now, of course, the finger configuration will change a little bit once you get over to that, what we call the E string, which is now the drop D string, okay? It's going to feel like you're playing a G and an A at first on there. It's going to feel like you're playing the B, C, D. However, those notes are lower because that string is tuned down a whole step to that D, okay? So even though it feels like you're playing the same thing, and of course these power chords here, the G and the A, you're barring those notes. You're not playing the actual same configuration, right? Because if you were to play that, what wouldn't be those notes, right? So you're barring those notes on the 3rd fret and the 5th fret. And I know this is pertaining mostly to guitar players, but I just want to make this point real quick. You know, this lesson is for keyboard players, for bass players, anyone playing any instrument. You know, when you tune down like this or change tunings in general, well, that impacts all instruments. So it's good to know the notes that you're playing with that, and that's the point of this lesson. So let's break this down real quick, okay? We're going to change this from E minor to, of course, D minor. Now your whole step down, obviously, from E is going to be the D. And again, that's a minor. So if we go over, what is our next chord? What is our next power chord? Well, what's a whole step down from G? That would be F, right? Okay, so that's what you're playing. Then standard tuning, we went to an A. What's your whole step down from the A? Well, that's going to be your G. Okay, now for the little riff that we have here, okay, the BCB, well, we're dropping that down a whole step. Now, in theory, right, if you're playing guitar in drop D, you know, your configuration here, because these are single notes, it's going to be the same frets, but remember that string is dropped down a whole step. So we have to realize that we're not playing a BCB anymore, okay? We're actually playing an A, B flat, A, because that's a whole step down. So let's move on to the third and final riff, and this is going to have a little bit more edge to it. This is the riff in standard tuning. so we've got a lot more going on there, and these are the notes that we're going to break this down, okay, in the key of E minor, E standard tuning, and of course we'll play it in drop D. This is really going to get cool. But the reason I chose this particular progression here is because we've got a few notes in here, specifically the F and the B flat that we're playing, and I'll go through this, that don't necessarily belong in the key of E minor. We made some what I like to call metal exceptions here. Now, we do have a video on how to use a really easy way to use the circle of fifths without diving into a whole lot of theory, just an easy way to use that to figure out which notes go with which progression and key and that sort of thing. I'll put it up there, but I'll also leave the link in the description of this video, and I've got some other helpful stuff that we're going to talk about at the end, so hang around for that. But anyway, so we've got the F that we're starting out with, then we go to the E, then we've got a B flat, back to the E, and these are the two chords that really give it that edgy, almost evil sound, right? And it's just pure metal. So after that, we go back to the F, kind of where we started with the F, then the E, and then we've got like a little walk down of chords here, of power chords here, with the B flat, the A, and the G. So let's hear what this riff sounds like in drop D. All right, now that sounded a little bit more brutal, so let's break down the notes. So we're going to go from E minor, of course this is in the key of D minor now, because we are in drop D, and that's what this is based on here. So remember, guys, remember everything, just to simplify this, okay, this doesn't have to be complex at all. Everything drops down a whole step, you know, the D here, right? That's a whole step from what? From E. So everything else, note-wise, is just dropping down a whole step, regardless of where you play it. It's just a whole step. So, you know, like the first riff we played, remember we played simple E, C, D. Well, we know that E is now drop D, so, well, what's a whole step from C? Well, that's a B flat, right? What's a whole step from that next note, or that next chord, which would be D? Well, that's a C. Easy way to remember that. Anyway, so let's break down the notes real quick. So now in D minor, in the key of D minor, we're dropping everything back a whole step. So this would essentially, this F here would essentially turn in really to a D sharp or E flat, however you want to say that. I believe D sharp would be the appropriate note here. That's a whole step down, right? After that, we're going to go to a G sharp. That is a whole step down from the B flat note here, okay? Then we go back to that D, right? Then we just kind of replicate what we started out here with that part again right here, the F to E, you know, D sharp D. And this last little walk down of power chords, we've got a B flat, an A, and a G that was in standard tuning. So that will turn into a G sharp, G, and F. Now you might be thinking, what's the relevance of knowing the notes? I don't care if I'm playing a B flat or C, I'm just gonna play the appropriate frets on my guitar or keyboard or bass or whatever. Here's the thing though, guys. We want to challenge you at Metal Mastermind. That's what we do. We want to challenge you to dive a little bit deeper, dive into that next level. On that note, speaking of riff writing and songwriting and connecting everything together, we do have a free metal songwriting guide. I'd like to give that to you. There's a link in the description of this video here, so grab your copy of that. That's really going to give you some helpful tips and kind of some guidance on writing your own riffs and how to connect the dots and that sort of thing. We even dive into lyric writing as well. If you've already got the free guide, once you get that first, but if you already have that, we do have a premium metal songwriting course. This is a complete course. It's online. Really encourage you to take a look at that. There's a link in the description for that as well. It's called Metal Songwriters Forge. I want to thank you so much for watching our video. Real quick, please give this a like, and if this video helped you, go ahead and drop us a comment. If you have any questions, leave a comment, and feel free to share this video with someone as well. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.